We always look forward.
Yeah, and I have to say, as Ron was saying, we always look forward. But this next guest, Pat, I mean, I'm always in awe by who you get to come on with you. But Joseph Pearce, my goodness, I've loved everything he's written. Can't wait to hear this conversation you have with him.
A chat with Pat.
He is amazing. Joseph Pearce, visiting professor of literature at Ave Maria University, visiting fellow at St. Thomas More College of Liberal Arts, also the author of more than 30 books. I mean, it would take me the entire chat with Pat to go through everything, but I do want to point people to his website, J. Pearce, and that's PEARCE.co. So J. Pearce, PEARCE.co, because Joseph has wonderful things there. Good morning, Joseph. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on today, because this article in the National Catholic Register called A Healthy Trinity, Nurturing Soul, Mind, and Body Together. I love this article. It was short, easy to read, but man, I am still chewing on it in my head. There is so much you packed in here. So can you explain this concept that you're talking about, a different idea of a healthy Trinity, small t, versus what we always talk about, the Holy Trinity. So can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, well, I mean, it was, of course, inspired by the Holy Trinity, the idea that certain things are inseparable, so that although there might be three, they're also one. That's obviously, the Trinity is the main model of that. But I think as regards our own health, the same thing applies. So ever since I became a Catholic, or just before even, I started practicing what I call a healthy Trinity, which means that every single day I try to find time to set aside for physical health, intellectual health, and spiritual health. So spiritual health obviously would be prayer particularly, or spiritual reading perhaps, or obviously attending the sacraments, Mass, or what have you. Intellectual health is to make sure that we've got a rigorous intellectual life, and I would actually suggest that's away from the screen and looking at books. And then, of course, the physical health is making sure we find time every day to give our body that physical exercise, because our bodies physically are temples of the Holy Spirit. So it's also important we don't just look after the mind and the soul, but the body.
So, Joseph, with intellectual, do you discern that as being different from spiritual because of what you would read to stimulate your intellectual capacity?
Yeah, I think spiritual health basically is interacting directly with God or neighbor. In other words, to be doing what we need to do to get to heaven directly, for what's good for the soul. Intellectual health, we know that the Catholic Church has always taught that there's an indissoluble marriage between fides et ratio, between faith and reason. So we need to make sure that we're intellectually rigorous, that our minds are also exercised. And of course, that primarily, I think, means engaging with reading. Now, we have to be very careful about what we read. We don't want to be reading junk, because that's not going to be very good for our mental or spiritual health. So we need to be reading something which is rigorous and healthy intellectually. So, I mean, I'm a literature person, so I would include in that, for instance, the great works of Western literature, but there's also the great works of Western philosophy. Theological reading, if it's Thomas Aquinas' Summa, for instance, Augustine's Confessions, things that exercise the mind as well as the soul. Whereas spiritual exercise would be mostly prayer-oriented towards good works or prayer, which is, of course, the good work.
Right. Well, Joseph, I think people they understand these as three distinct parts, right? So I think more people have trouble maybe seeing them as connected or inseparable or interwoven. Can you kind of explain that to us? How can we go from these three things to seeing them as one?
Yeah, the metaphor I have as regards the time each day is of an equilateral triangle. So I actually, in the past, when I was monitoring it more closely, it's about an hour and 15 minutes for each part of that. Well, the point is that we are, we know that fat people can go to heaven. So I'm not saying that, if you're obese and you're out of shape physically, you're going to go to hell. That's obviously nonsense. But our bodies are gifts from God. They are temples of the Holy Spirit. We believe in an incarnate God. We believe that the Word becomes flesh, not just in the incarnation of Jesus Christ, but in transubstantiation during Mass. So our flesh, our body, is something which we also have to keep healthy. So if we allow our minds or our bodies to, shall we say, atrophy, to decay because we're not exercising them, it will impact and affect our spiritual health. So it's very important for us to keep a healthy balance between mind, body, and soul.
I tend to think people of faith especially we've got to keep this relationship with our God, intact and first and foremost. Do you think there are people, though, that one of them is more of a struggle for than others, or do you think that in our society today, one is more of a struggle than others?
Well, I think the challenge today in our dumbed-down culture is certainly intellectual health. G.K. Chesterton said a century ago that the coming peril was standardization by a low standard. So basically dumbing everything down. And many of us never pick up a book. Many of us don't read except trivia on the screen. I think that's we find that we're becoming, if you like, very out of shape mentally because of that. And it is absolutely going to affect our spiritual and physical health also. We need to remember, in this respect, that the Catholic Church has also taught, as well as the indissoluble marriage between faith and reason, the indissoluble marriage between faith and works, between prayer and works. So the Benedictine motto, ora et labora, prayer and labor, prayer and work. So, physical activity and mental activity is a form of prayer. We can't sort of lock ourselves away and think we can just have some sort of dialogue with God. And that will be sufficient to get us to heaven, because we have to love the Lord our God and to love our neighbor. Those two things are inseparable. So physical work should be oriented to ensuring that we are physically able to do what we're called to do as Christians, physically and mentally and spiritually. These are inseparable. They're woven together in an inseparable way, which is why I talk about them being a trinity, not just a trio, three things, but a trinity. The three things are indissolubly woven together.
And I think that sometimes that physical piece is something that people don't always attribute. They don't see that always being wrapped into their faith. And you do a nice job of explaining how it is a part of who we are as Catholics or who we are as Christians, that we need to understand where we're created in the image of God, and that this physical temple of the Holy Spirit, we got to take care of it, right? That's part of loving ourselves, correct?
Indeed, exactly, and absolutely. Of course, everything that we do could be poisoned by pride. So people might be doing physical exercise to make themselves look great for the beach or in front of the mirror, but intellectual exercise, right? We might be reading something that will make us successful in a worldly sense in life, or even in prayer. We know about the parable of the Pharisee and the publican in the temple. The two went up to pray. The publican said, well, I look after my spiritual life. I'm a good person. I'm not, unlike these miserable sinners. Well, we're not going to get to heaven with that attitude. So prayer can be polluted by pride. Physical exercise can be polluted by pride, and mental exercise can be polluted by pride.
Oh, that's a great insight, Joseph. I could talk to you a lot longer on this, but thank you so much for being with us today. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. God bless you.
Have a great weekend ahead here.